at some specific helpful tools that you can kind of add to your tool belt and that you can use. First, let's look at CBT. So CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and this is maybe the most important form of therapy that you'll encounter in inpatient, outpatient programs, maybe in dealing with therapists as well. And I would say it's very helpful. I think that I didn't give it enough credit. My mom always thought that this helped me a lot. I wasn't so sure, but looking back, I think that it is helpful. And sometimes with my clients, I work with them on these things too, at least a little bit. So there's a book called Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. I would highly recommend that you get it, Feeling Good. And he really lays out all of this cognitive behavioral therapy stuff. But basically, the idea is that you notice what type of thought you're having, right? And it's probably some type of distorted thought, right? There's something that's in your head that is ripping you apart, right? And then you think about, okay, is that true? Or what type of thought fallacy is that, right? And he's got all these different types of thought fallacies, like black or white thinking, overgeneralization, labeling, and he gives all the definitions of all these different thought fallacies of different ways that we think about things where it's not really true, right? And so then, you have, okay, this is the thought, this is the type of thought fallacy is, and then you write out the true thing. So maybe the thought is, maybe you have these health issues and you think, I'm broken and inadequate, right? And then it's like, okay, well, that would be labeling, right? You're labeling yourself, I am broken and inadequate. And the true thing would be, I'm not broken and inadequate. I'm just a normal person that is struggling with some health issues, right? And so every time you come back to that thought of, I'm inadequate, you know, like I have depression and I'm inadequate, or I have bipolar and I'm inadequate. It's like, that's labeling, right? Or I am bipolar and I'm inadequate, right? And so labeling yourself. And then you have your answer to it, which is, well, I'm not inadequate, I'm just struggling with some health things right now. And so a lot of times with depression, anxiety, bipolar, there's a lot of these distorted thoughts. And so the idea with CBT is that you sort of learn to track your thoughts and you even write them down, and you learn these thought fallacies, and most of us have certain things that we come back to a lot. And then you're able to sort of straighten out your thought and say what it actually is. So I'm trying to think of another example. Like I can either work full-time or I'm a failure, right? That might be a thought. Like maybe you're thinking, you know, since you're not working full-time, you're a failure. So I can either work full-time or I'm a failure, and that's all or nothing thinking. Like it's either this or that. And then the true thing is, maybe you could say something like, I'm not a failure, I just am working part-time while I'm figuring out some of my health struggles, right? And so you're saying like what the true thing is or what the actual thing is. And so this is CBT, and he's got all of these different thought fallacies. Those were a couple of them, overgeneralization. He's got, I think there's a list of like 12 of them or something like that. And this is something that's very helpful. So you can go through those and you can see what your thought fallacies are that you use the most. And there's probably certain thoughts that you keep having, right? Your pet things. Maybe there's 2, 3, 4 things that you're just always coming back to that are ripping you to pieces. And you can label, okay, well, is that true? Like what type of distorted thought is that? And then what is the thing that's actually true? And as you practice this stuff, it can help. It can help your thoughts become a little less severe. It can help you to sort of get a handle on like, okay, even without this, basically the premise of CBT is like, okay, you have a thought that's distorted, what's actually true, right? So whenever you're having a thought that's negative, you're counterbalancing it with like, what is actually true about the situation? And typically when we're having this thought, it's something that is distorted, right? So CBT is definitely, I think, a very valuable thing to have in your tool belt. I'm going to erase a little bit of this so we can put some more tools on here. But CBT is definitely one of them. Another one is mindfulness. So this is another thing you'll often learn about in inpatient and outpatient programs. And I think that this is helpful. So mindfulness in a nutshell is learning how to be in the moment, learning how to get out of your head and be in the moment. And basically how that's usually taught, at least that I've been exposed to it, is sort of going like one sense at a time and sort of tapping into the moment you're in. So for example, if you're in the moment right now, right now you're watching this, but let's say if you weren't watching this, maybe you would, take 15 seconds or so to look around and look at like everything that you can see and take in everything you can see with your eyes. And then maybe you would close your eyes and you would notice everything that you hear for 15 seconds. And then you would try touching the things around you. Notice everything that you feel with the sensation of your touch, and then that you smell and then taste. And then you kind of bring it all together. And it's just sort of meant to be able to sense the things around you that are in your immediate surroundings, and that can sort of ground you to the moment. So when you're experiencing severe depression, anxiety, whatever, bipolar, you're sort of like really, really trapped in your head with these intense thoughts. And so sometimes just noticing what's directly in front of you in a really focused way and really focusing one sense at a time can sort of bring you into the moment and get you a little bit out of your head. So mindfulness is definitely another tool, another thing that can help you to deal with these intense things that you're feeling. So naps, this is a really interesting one. And this is something that's still true about me to this day, is sometimes I would just get really overwhelmed with like my thoughts and emotions, and I feel like I'm crashing, right? And I feel like I'm paralyzed, and I feel like I'm just going through the floor and I'm not gonna be able to get anything accomplished. And when I get in those modes, when in the past, and even now when I get in those modes, sometimes what I have to do is I just have to lay down and take a nap and knock out. And I think when you have depression, anxiety, bipolar, your mind is very, very strong and powerful and intense. And sometimes almost like a supercomputer or something, your mind just like heats up and like freezes, just the way a computer freezes. And sometimes with the computer, you have to reboot the computer, and you restart it and it wakes up and it's good. And you don't really know why that was, but it's okay. It's good. And I think sometimes when you have depression, anxiety, bipolar, at least for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case for other people too, this helps, right? So I would nap and I would wake up an hour later and I would feel infinitely better, just rebooting myself. So this is a good tool for you to know about. So if you're feeling, really overwhelmed, really going through the floor and crashing, maybe try taking a nap for an hour, wake up, you might be surprised. Walking and talking. Whenever I was like really, really trapped in my head, a lot of times I would go for a walk with my parents around the block, and just getting my body moving and like feeling these thoughts flowing out of my head that were just so tightly trapped in there. It was almost like toxins like being released from my body, and I was sort of like, okay, cool, like I'm feeling better. After that 20-minute walk or whatever, I would always feel way better. And if you don't have somebody to do that with, you can do that on your own, and you can sort of talk out loud to yourself. Maybe you want to do that not where there's a lot of people, but I found that walking and talking, getting my body moving, getting those thoughts out of me in that way, I always found that to be really helpful. So that's another thing you can use. Journaling, same sort of idea, that these intense thoughts are sort of like flying around in our head. And this is true for people without health issues as well. It's just more true for those of us who do have these struggles, that they're sort of more intense and harder to control. So sometimes by just writing, and you don't have to do any structured type of journaling, you can just write out everything that's in your head. And you may not even ever look at it again. It's okay if it's not even legible handwriting, but you get it out of your head, and sometimes you can feel a little like, okay, that's out of that toxic stuff in my head is out of my system, that's good, right? So that's another thing. And then music, which I talked about already in some detail, so I'll only briefly mention it again, but even if you're not a music person, you may want to consider trying this. I think it's something that does help to kind of redirect your thoughts and bring you to sort of a more pleasant frequency or way of experiencing that moment that you're in. So these are a bunch of things that can help you, right? Just little things day to day as you're making it and as you're struggling and you're like, man, well, how am I gonna go about handling all this stuff? CBT, mindfulness, taking naps when you're really struggling, walking, talking, journaling, music. These are some things that have really helped me that I think are helpful things to know about. Again, Some of those might speak to you more than others, but give each of them a try and play with it and see what works for you. So you can take a screenshot of this if you need to, and we're gonna go on to the next thing now.